So 13 years ago, we created Coc Coc to build a browser and search engine for Vietnamese. And not that many people think about those tools today, but those are core tools of the internet that every one of us is using every day. So today I want to share about what has been our journey to reinvent those tools for Vietnamese users. I also want to share about the recent breakthroughs in generative AI, how it's disrupting the whole internet, and it's going to give us the opportunity to reinvent those tools once again. But first, let's start with an interesting fact that the chairman of Coc Coc shared with me when I joined. So he shared with me that today there are more countries in the world with nuclear weapons than countries with browsers and search engine. So this is shocking, right? And it makes you realize that it's very rare for local player to be able to compete with global giants, tech giants in that space, right? I was amazed when I joined Coc Coc to learn that. And I was also very proud to know that Vietnam is on that list, thanks to Coc Coc. But so the next logical question here is, why is it that way? Why is it so hard to compete in browsers and search engine? And there are basically two main reasons. Reason number one is very hard to build those products, right? It's very hard product to build. And the second reason, it's probably even harder to distribute successfully those products, right? But let's start with the search engine and how hard it is to build a search engine. So if you think about it, the bar is very high. And users expect that a good search engine will answer to their queries in few hundred of milliseconds with very accurate results, right? But this is very hard problem to solve, because almost instantly you need to give an answer to users, and you need to pick good results out of billions of options, right? So this is hard problem to solve. And I think the number two challenge that I want to share with you is that distribution of search and browsers is a monopoly, right? Google has monopolized the distribution of search engine through browsers because they own Chrome browser, but also because they have deals with other big browsers such as Firefox and Opera. And on smartphone, they also monopolize the distribution of search engine and browsers because they own Android, right? Every Android smartphone, because of the Android license, the manufacturer has to put Google Search and Google Chrome as the default. So it's very hard to enter. And what about Apple devices? Google is paying Apple every year $16 billion to make sure that they are the default search on every Apple devices, right? This is a huge amount of money, and somehow this is an incentive for Apple to never enter that space, to never innovate in search, right? To never launch a competitor to Google. Right? So this is the landscape that we have to compete in. And I just want to give a last example of how hard it is to compete. And this example is actually Microsoft. Right? So Microsoft, over decades, invested billions of dollars to try to grow Bing search, Microsoft browser, which is Edge now. And they never really succeeded to really make a difference and challenge the Google domination in the search engine space. So then I want to move to how we did it, right? How we reinvented the wheel in Vietnam and successfully competed against tech giants. So the first reason we were successful, and we are successful, is we always focus on Vietnamese users, right? So from the beginning, we always wanted to focus on Vietnamese users because we knew this is where we can make a difference, and this is where we need to fight, right? So our browser is focusing mainly on quality of search. Our search engine is focusing mostly on Vietnamese, right? And what we are doing is we try to make search result in Vietnamese better than Google. And in the early days, we had to build tools to better manage Vietnamese language. So Vietnamese tokenizer to better group Vietnamese words, a Vietnamese spell checker, Vietnamese synonyms, you name it, right? So that was our focus. And then on the browser side, that was the same approach, right? So we tried to focus on Vietnamese user pain points and try to solve them so we are better than the default, right? So when we launched, what we did is we integrated tools to make sure that download was faster when internet wasn't very fast in Vietnam, right? That internet was also more stable, and then we're blocking ads and such kind of features that we knew Vietnamese users were looking for. And there's one example that worked really well for us, is about access to Facebook, right? So when we launched in 2013, access to Facebook wasn't very stable, right? So, but we find a way to make it stable, and you can imagine that, when Facebook was growing, and the only way to get stable access to Facebook was Coc Coc, then, that's how we grew in the early days. But those pain points keep changing, and that's why we need to keep reinventing the wheel again and again. It's a big challenge, but that's why we try to do. And then, I want to go to the second success factor, which is very important. It is about the team, right? So we have a team that is very talented, and initially we had world-class engineers, search engineers, because, as I mentioned, it's very hard to build a search engine. But this talent spread across all teams. And talent is not enough. Actually, we also have this mindset inside the company that we can build anything, right? We are realistic, but we have this mindset that if we try really hard, we will find a way to build anything. And it comes from the initial belief that you can come to Vietnam, you can build a search engine, you can build a browser, and you can compete against Google. And sometimes it goes even too far. And I am going to give you an example. So when I joined, we were still using our own HR system. We were still using our own email system. We are still using our own CRM system that we built, right? And we were even using our own medical insurance, right? If you think about it, for a company like Coc Coc to have our own medical insurance, it's crazy. It's very risky. But just to illustrate the mindset, someone in the team said, okay, I will do medical insurance. And they write down the policy on how we will reimburse medical bills to our employees, right? Now we changed that because, when I joined, I said, this is crazy, it's too risky. And so we moved to, like more traditional providers for those non-core services, but just to illustrate the mindset. And so far, I'll be honest with you, I've been telling you a very nice story about Coc Coc, right? But this is just one side of the story. I think the other side of the story is that, very often we fail. Very often we are stuck. And it feels like we are banging our heads, against the wall. We cannot find any solution. And so this is tough, right? And so that's where I want to mention about Coc Coc culture. And you need to have something bigger, so that people in your team, despite all the challenges, they can keep going. And that's what I want to share with you. And very early on, so about 1 month after joining, I realized that Coc Coc culture was special. Something was special. And then But at that time, actually, we didn't have anything written down, right? So I knew that we have something special, but nobody wrote down what the corporate culture, what Cok Cok culture was about. So what we did, I worked with the HR team, and we interviewed about 30 team members. We sent a survey to all employees to try to crystallize what the culture was, right? And one of the output is our mission statement. And yeah, this is our mission statement. So to make Vietnamese people happier by helping them make the most of the digital world. And yeah, if you read it like this, it sounds very cheesy and, you know, I'm going to save the world, but I just want to illustrate that this is really the mindset of our team members. And I'll give you one example. So one of the interviews that I did is this Russian engineer who joined Coc Coc 7 years ago. And so he moved to Vietnam with his whole family, right? And they're super happy in Vietnam. Why? Because people are happy. They like, you know, the happiness that is around. And so he shared with me that one of his dreams actually is to be able to one day measure the happiness of Coc Coc users, right? And so one day we could move from daily active user, which is the key metric that we're tracking every day, right, to daily happy user, right? Not just active, but happy. So just to tell you that all this is really inspiring, but somehow you need, you know, this broader mission and willing to make an impact to keep going despite the challenges. Okay, I'm going to check my phone a bit to see where am I. So, sorry for that. Okay, so making people happier is kind of a broader like aspiration for us, right? But even before making people happier, we think that Coc Coc is improving internet for Vietnamese users because we are here, we compete. And because we are here, we are forcing Google to pay more attention to Vietnam, right? We are forcing Google to invest more in Vietnam. And when everybody is competing and, you know, just making more efforts to deliver good products, good services, it's just better for users, right? So we think it's very important to have competition. And if you follow the, you know, recent trend, mostly in Europe and US, there are a lot of legal cases and even regulation that is coming out to try to make the competition more fair, right? To regulate those monopolies. And we think this is important, but this is for the long term. And what I want to share next is that, you know, even if you have those monopolies that are trying to restrict innovation and competition, innovation is still going to happen, right? And the recent trend with OpenAI is just a proof that, you know, it's happening and big tech can be disrupted. So I'm going to move to OpenAI, ChatGPT, how it's taking the world by storm, and how it's disrupting the internet. So let me start with a quick definition for everyone. I'm sure some of you know that, but so GPT, what is it? So GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, right? So it's a type of large language model, right? And this is really where you know, the recent breakthrough happened, right? Because it's so good, right? But the interesting fact that few people know is that transformers were actually first introduced at Google in 2017, right? So Google was there first, but still they did not, you know, innovate in that space. And so fast forward, you know, November of last year, end of November, OpenAI launched ChatGPT. It took the world by storm. You know, after 2 months, 100 million users. is the fastest, user adoption rate anything we have ever seen. And so why is that? So first of all, as I mentioned, there is a real breakthrough in large language model. It's really, really good, right? So it can produce text that is really good. Mostly it's really good in English. I'm going to touch on it. It's less good in Vietnamese, but it's still really good, and it can write code, right? So, and also it's in the chat, right? So that makes this breakthrough in large language model accessible to a lot of users and easy to use, at least at first, right? So, yeah, so this is the adoption rate of some tech products. You can see ChatGPT fastest 2 months, right? Took Facebook 4.5 years to get to 100 million users. So you can imagine the speed. So that's where I think it's a proof that is a real breakthrough. After ChatGPT, let me continue the history since November last year. In February, Microsoft integrated ChatGPT, not ChatGPT, sorry, integrated GPT language model in Microsoft Bing and in their browser, right? And then they announced later on that they will invest $10 billion in OpenAI, right? So the company that is owning those language models, right? And then Google, in parallel, they went basically on red alert. This is the official internal communication, right? Like red alert. And then they scrambled to announce that they're going to release a competitor to ChatGPT called Bart. Finally, 2 weeks back on May 11th, they released to everyone Bart, but mostly focusing on English. Is not as good as ChatGPT. And then that same week, they also had the I/O conference that they do every year, and they announced that they will do AI, everywhere across products. So it's a bit ironic that actually it was Google who invented the transformer, but they had to have like a competition to really push them to use those technologies and make their product better, right? And nobody will know, right? But some commenters said that if they were pushing themselves, maybe we would have ChatGPT 2 years earlier, right? Generative AI is taking the world by storm. There's a lot of new AI companies being created, even in the search space, but that's mostly in the US, right? So in the next part, I'm going to try to share with you, what's the status of AI in Vietnam, and how we're going to try to reinvent the wheel once again for Vietnamese browser and search engine. So AI in Vietnam. There are two big issues for Vietnamese language. Or AI in Vietnam. The first issue is accessibility, right? So this is, as of today, ChatGPT is officially not available in Vietnam, right? So if you try to sign up to ChatGPT and you are in Vietnam, this is the message that you'll get, right? So this is a big problem. So number two, GPT is not that great in Vietnamese, or is not as great in Vietnamese as in English, right? And there's basically two reasons. So this is like a data set that is used to train GPT. This is like what's available publicly in terms of information. But so Vietnamese is only about 1% of the data set to train the GPT language model, 1%, right? And in that table, you can see, it's still in the category of they call high resource languages, right? But it's the last one, and to be honest, 1% doesn't feel like very high resource, right? when you can see English is almost 46%. Right, so that's one problem. And then, I mean, the adjacent problem is that basically those language model, I mean, the GPT language model is just not designed to handle Vietnamese, right? So tokenizer is very basic building block to break words into small pieces, and you can see in English, this is a duck, and then below you can see how it's dividing words. It's working pretty well, right? And in Vietnamese, it's just a mess, right? So this block is not working well for Vietnamese. It's going to impact quality, and it's going to impact speed and costs, right? So the main message here is that we need large language model for Vietnamese, right? And then, so I mentioned the, two problems specific to Vietnamese: accessibility, quality of language model for Vietnamese language. And then there is a third problem that is not specific to Vietnamese, but it's for everyone. All those products are new, and you can play with them. They're quite impressive. But if you really want to use them efficiently, you need to learn about it, and it's not that easy, right? And there's a new job description that all the companies in the field are putting out. It's called prompt engineer, right? Which means that there is a prompt engineer that is trying to find a way to write the best instructions to large language models so you get the best outcome, right? But if you have to be an engineer to do that, then for normal users, it's not going to work. So why I mentioned those three problems? Because of course we're going to try to solve them, right? So we're going to try to solve accessibility when we launch our AI products. We're going to try to solve large language models for Vietnamese, but for that we know that we need to partner. We're not going to be able to do it by ourselves, but we have some building blocks with the browser and search engine, right? And we are going to try to solve, to try to solve, to make it easy for users to leverage, those AI technologies. And, that's the ultimate step, right? Because what you want is actually, you want to put those AI technologies into products that are easy to use for Vietnamese users and accessible, right? So this is what we're going to try to do. This is very exciting. Maybe it's even more challenging than building a search engine. This is still like big tech companies, right? You heard some of the numbers, but OpenAI is basically owned by Microsoft, and they put 10 billion additional investment this year, in addition to 3 billion that they put before, right? So it's big tech. So it's challenging because, how do we compete, in Vietnam against those big tech companies that have this massive scale, right? But for sure, we need to try. We need to try. And so this is the kind of the mission of Coc Coc, to bring all those technologies to Vietnamese users. And so I just want to conclude a bit, give a broader picture about this journey and share with you, if you want to reinvent the wheel and to make to change something in the world around you, you need to find great people that want to make an impact, right? And I think it's very important. And you should, if you haven't found yet, this great team of people who want to make an impact, my advice for you is to keep looking, right? And keep looking. And once you find it, just work hard, and believe in yourself, and then try to make it happen. Thank you.